equitable revenue share for counties from 15% to 20%. And Mr. Speaker, also on the issue of constitution of IEBC. IEBC is extremely critical, whereby we come up to a consensus so that we may continue to improve on its performance. Mr. Speaker, one thing I can say is that we have continued to improve on IEBC because most of the issues that have been raised mostly are on the presidential. But when you come to the lower levels where the MCA, the MP, the senator, the governor, we are almost perfecting. And if we come good on this issue, we will be able to perform well on IEBC. Mr. Speaker, my issue is on the annexes. The annexes on the amendment of the Constitution. There is somewhere there is an amendment of the term of the member of parliament and the term for the senator, whereby in the amendment, in the annexes, they have said that the senator should go for 7 years and the member of parliament remain at 5 years. Mr. Speaker, that's an issue. I know it can bring contention or division maybe among its members, and I wish the committee should consider on that amendment, whereby the senators have been considered for 7 years. That is allowed amendment Article 105, 102, 103, 105, whereby senators have been considered for 7 years. That, Mr. Speaker, is an issue I know can bring issue on the issue of the dialogue. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, it has been said that it will be the adoption or the amendment in the Constitution will be made by parliamentary initiative. I have seen some members of parliament maybe who are raising issue whether we will go for referendum or we work with Article 256 of the popular initiative by parliament. Mr. Speaker, if I must ask, I could wish we come to consensus whereby we can work on the popular initiative of Article 256, whereby as parliament we can be able to raise the 2/3, but we come to agreement on the issues that are a bit contentious. My also proposal is that as we add 5% from 15% on the equitable revenue share, we consider the 5% toward development. We have off-roaded the national government through NGCDF, through the equitable share to counties. We must also off-road the money going to the counties. Because the more you give counties, some of the counties, they increase on personnel. Therefore, the 5% that we are adding from 15% should be considered to go and cater for World Development Fund, so that that money can go directly to development. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, my issue is that that section where senators, I don't know who did put that because it has been very silent, but when you go to the annexes of the amendment, you find that senators have been considered to go for 7 years and the other members are considered for 5 years. That's an issue I think should be looked at because it can raise issues.
The Honorable Wanjiku Muhia. The Honorable John Namoit. Members who don't, the Honorable John Namoit. I have a dashboard that I look at, so I will follow it. The next is the Honorable Beatrice Elachi.
No. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I also rise, Mr. Speaker, to speak on this report, to appreciate the committee, to appreciate indeed the President and the Prime Minister for agreeing that a country is more better, more beyond each one of us. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, as I start, I would want us to really appreciate that even women in this country are Kenyans who came. They presented, Mr. Speaker, even as I appreciate the different clauses that are there and appreciating that now when the Senate is going for 7 years, it is going to cure the issue of you being a senator, You go or you become a governor, you finish 10 years and you come back to become a senator and you decide you are going to look to your own accounts, which ethically is very wrong. But Mr. Speaker, I want to speak on the issue of the 2/3 gender rule and to appreciate what the majority leader said and what the minority leader said, Mr. Speaker, in supporting and ensuring by principle that indeed in the NADCO report, they picked and they recommended, indeed, we shall achieve the 2/3 gender rule. But Mr. Speaker, we have to come out of the confusion that we have put. When you look at the report, Mr. Speaker, in the intro, it is very clear we presented to Bomas our recommendations. Thereafter, Mr. Speaker, we had different groups that came in, and you realize the multisectoral also came in, and their presentation was based on the formula. And therefore, by principle, we are saying this House, the 13th Parliament, based on the goodwill of the President, we shall achieve the 2/3. Mr. Speaker, what I want to plead with this House, that indeed, if the report of the multisectoral that deals with the formula is presented in this House, procedurally we must adapt, since we have not seen the other reports of how we are going to ensure the 7 years work, how we are going to ensure the MCS fund comes in, how we are going to ensure IBC is established, and therefore, even as the women, I am pleading with the leadership, I am pleading with the country, I am pleading to the President, to the Prime Minister, that when our report comes on the floor of this House, we shall adapt it as one report with the NADCO report. Mr. Speaker, all these confusions, we are told women are under the bus, we want to say the report is very clear. Article 463, 464 explains very clear what the committee said and what we need to adapt. And therefore, all I am pleading is to ensure, Mr. Speaker, this matter of the 2/3 gender rule. I am pleading with the National Assembly members that we can work as a team and ensure we pass it. And therefore, I am requesting the ministry to ensure they bring in the report so that we can look at the formula and adapt the formula, Mr. Speaker. I also want to thank every man, every champion who has stood on this agenda, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I finalize, the most important thing is that when JLAC will be bringing all the, I'll call it omnibus, of all these other proposals that are there, the proposal of 2/3 will be part of it. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, we should not allow again to go back to the days when we are saying, now again the 2/3 will come alone, it will be a standalone. We are saying and we are pleading by procedure, based on what the majority leader and the minority leader agreed, we can agree as a House, support, and I believe the National Assembly will indeed make women of this country know that we are one. We are there to walk a journey together to see the development of our country. Mr. Speaker, it is very sad when women are told in this country that we will have a balloon budget or they will do. Is it only the women? Why is it is so easy to give 7 years to the Senate, as much as I'm supporting that proposal, that it is so difficult to agree on this proposal? For me, by principle, I know it is in the report, and therefore it will be very unfortunate that we can come and start now speaking on different tongues on this report, on this issue of 2/3 gender, when the President was very clear that this will be his, indeed, achievement for the women of Kenya. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I support and plead that we really need to appreciate when the report comes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Member for the Gausi South.
Mr. Speaker, I thank you. And I want to take this opportunity to first thank the wisdom of the President and the leader of opposition, the former Prime Minister, in finding the wisdom to have the country cool down the temperatures and sit on the table and have a conversation about the posterity of this nation. Mr. Speaker, the wise people tell us that when the debate is lost, that is when the arguments set in, and that is when violence sets in. But we are civilized people, Mr. Speaker, so that Kenya as a country is able to prosecute the matters that we find to be a thorn in the flesh in a decent way. And the National Dialogue Committee presented such a case. Mr. Speaker, I also have to thank the leadership of the Leader of Majority, the Honorable Kimani Ichung'wah, and the Leader of the Wiper Party for steering the ship to a stage where we have a report before us and we are able to debate it before this House. Mr. Speaker, one of the biggest achievements of NADCO is placing the problems at the place where they can find solutions. Mr. Speaker, some of the issues that are being discussed at NADCO would not get a solution anywhere else. It could not get a solution in the streets. It could not get a solution in the bars. Some of the issues needed legislative remedies. And the only house tasked with the responsibility of legislation is the House of Parliament. Mr. Speaker, so this report is now properly and procedurally before the right place so that this House can do as it wills because it is guided by Article 95 and 96 of the Constitution to do what we are doing. Mr. Speaker, we are just coming out of the third reading of the housing bill, Mr. Speaker. And you remember that the housing as an issue came up in these NADCO negotiations. And there was a push and pull about housing. But Mr. Speaker, without going into the details that we have canvassed this afternoon, it is important to see how our deliberations this afternoon were well informed by what was conversed during the NADCO negotiations. But most importantly, Mr. Speaker, NADCO gives us an opportunity, unlike the previous commissions that have been held in this country. Mr. Speaker, we have had the Ndongo Land Report. We have had the Kriegler Report. We have had the Truth and Justice and Reconciliation Report. Mr. Speaker, these are reports that are gathering dust because we as Kenyans, at that point, we did not have the courage to face the devils that have been bedeviled this country for decades, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it was during the BBI debate in this House that I said that if we had implemented the Ndongo Land Report, if we had implemented the recommendations by Kriegler, if we had implemented the report called the Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Report, Mr. Speaker, we would not have needed BBI because the issues about land that are being canvassed, that had become an historical issue, had been canvassed in the Ndongo Land Report. The issues of historical injustices have been canvassed by TRJRC. The issues about election injustices were in the Kriegler Report. So, Mr. Speaker, we as a generation now have an opportunity through this NADCO report to make things right, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I also shall take this opportunity to place it on the floor of this House that the decision made by His Excellency the President must have taken a lot of magnanimity on his side. Because I am sure that there are people on the side of the President who were not seeing the import of sitting down and negotiating with the opposition. There must have been people who are breathing fire to the leader of opposition, the very esteemed Prime Minister Raila Amolo Odinga, saying to him that he should not sit down with opponents. But because of their wisdom, Mr. Speaker, we now have a report before us. Mr. Speaker, I could not end this debate without putting my voice in support of the candidature for the former Prime Minister of this country, a well-fitting member of this African community. He fits the bill to be the chairman of the AU. And Mr. Speaker, I have to say that he has my undivided support as he goes for that bid, Mr. Speaker. And I know Kenya shall be behind him as he makes this bid for a continental seat so that his career will end on an esteemed note.
It is the chairperson of the AU Commission that is open. The Honorable Chekonga, what is out of order?